Hi, everyone, and welcome to Food as Commons. This is a lunchtime discussion that's part of the London Festival of Ideas. The theme this year is Your Vision for Strong Communities, and we'll be talking about that through the lens of food. My name is Hanna Baumann, and I'm a senior research fellow at the UCL Institute for Global Prosperity. And at the IGP, we spend a lot of time thinking about how to capture the value of community, how to enhance that value through the participation of communities in academic research as well, and to move beyond kind of the measures of value that just measure things like GDP or economic value. We also lead the research discussion on new models such as universal basic services, and we will return today to how food might play into such a vision of universal basic services. For the first half hour today, we'll have a discussion between our four speakers, who I'll welcome in a minute. All of them have had really meaningful experiences and exciting visions on how to create urban food systems that are more just and more sustainable, and how to use food as a catalyst for more than just feeding people. And after the first 30 minutes or so, we'll ask for yours, the audience participation. You can turn your cameras on at that point if you like, and we'll invite you to ask questions, to share your ideas and experiences as well. And if you would like live captioning for this event, you can actually follow this on Facebook Live rather than on Zoom. And the link for that should be shared in the chat. So to introduce our speakers today, we're joined by Bethany Martin. Beth is a social permaculture facilitator and an activist. They co-founded the Northeast London branch of the National Food Service, and this branch has prepared and distributed over 24,000 vegetarian and vegan meals, accompanied by grocery packages to people in need of food in Hackney, Haringey, and Islington over the past year and a bit. We're also joined by Ali Kakande, who's worked in advice, support for young families who need an ear with ex-offenders and those who struggle with addiction. Ali lives in Hackney, and during the first week of lockdown, she founded CaribEats, which delivers home-cooked Caribbean meals and offers various opportunities to cook, connect, and chat together. We're also joined by my colleague, Patrick Vickers, who also works at the Institute for Global Prosperity, where he has a focus on climate solutions. He runs the Institute's Fast Forward 2030 network, which is a group of entrepreneurs who are trying to build radical, sustainable businesses that focus on addressing the UN Sustainable Development Goals. He's also worked on creating community-led food solutions in Islington. And last but not least, we're joined by Lisa Rain Hunt, who's worked across a range of sectors from local to central government, voluntary sector, and arts and culture sectors. But for the past year, she's been coordinating Hackney's emergency food response as the council's strategic delivery manager. Please also note that some of us have very beautiful Zoom backgrounds, and these are made by my colleague and research collaborator, Johan Arends, who is a London-based artist. And together with him, I'm working on a project on food and food as a universal basic service. He's not here today, but we can share the other Zoom backgrounds that we weren't able to put up later on. So let's get started with the discussion. My first question is for you, Beth. I just mentioned the really impressive number of meals that you were able to deliver over the past year. And that's just your branch, as I understand, of the National Food Service. You're part of a much wider national network. Can you tell us a bit about how the NFS works across its branches and what the wider vision is?
Sure, thanks, Hannah. Thanks for having me here. So National Food Service was founded in 2018 by a branch in Sheffield called Food Hall. They're a social architecture organisation that is all around eating, food and company. And so there's now, I'm not actually sure, definitely over 9 branches across the UK that are there are just lots of different autonomous grassroots groups that are looking at and working to ensure that local people have access to affordable, nutritious, tasty food. And we're a solidarity network. We're doing that in our each group does it in their own way. We believe we see a world that has a national food service, but one that's built from the bottom up. So a sort of network of different groups led by the communities that they serve, meeting the needs in their community around food. In London, we're based in Hackney, and in the pandemic, the need was access to meals, access to groceries. So we started there, but we want to be working in partnership, and we believe that as you'll hear more, sort of Ali and CaribEats, and what we were doing with Lisa Rain, there's just so many groups across Hackney and Islington, Haringey, and all across London that are doing this work and doing it very in their own way, very hyper locally. So we see working in partnership, we see a redistribution of resources. We think that it's not about the state building a national food service. It's about the state giving us more resources, more money, more funds to build it ourselves. It's not one size fits all at all. Food.
Yeah, so maybe on that note, let me bring Ali in. Ali, you've worked with Beth and with the NFS, but your unique angle is that you supply Caribbean food, right? Can you tell us a bit about why you saw that as a gap in the local food provision and why it's important to provide that kind of culturally specific meal?
Yeah, thank you, Hannah. So yeah, you're right. I work very closely with Beth and Lisa Rain. I think it's important that people are able to access food that they're normally used to eating. And it just so happened that when I started, I didn't even plan to start a project. It just happened. I responded to a WhatsApp in the very start of the pandemic. And the request was a gentleman who normally relied on support services, and food was central to his everyday activities, and requested that he wasn't going to eat today, or his sister had. And it just so happened that I didn't know this. He's in one part of Hackney, I'm in another part. I was cooking some Caribbean food and he requested Caribbean food. And that was the kind of start of it. But then word of mouth spread. And I think what was really important for me, as I said, I was part of many WhatsApp groups, and dignity is something that matters to me, and it matters to people. I think we should take into consideration that just because people are asking for support, that dignity should be intact. And why Caribbean meals? I mean, we're in Hackney, and there's a lot of people who that's their dish, and that's what they're used to eating. Yeah, that's why we put Caribbean inspired meals.
Yeah, so from our conversations previously, I really gathered as well that for your clients, it's really important that there's sort of an emotional connection to food as well. It's not just about the calories or the nutrition even, right? It's about, there's even like a sense of belonging, of community that's linked to those things as well. Are there any particular instances where that came to the fore for you when you were dealing with people who you deliver meals to?
Yeah, I mean, so we're slightly different in that, and we always wanted to be, we didn't want to just drop and go. So part of our offer is that we connect when we deliver the food. And so the first week, people are a bit dubious. I was one of the people who was delivering, and they're just like, "What, you really doing this? You're giving us food?" I was like, "Yeah." Second, third, and I delivered for I think it was 13 weeks. So you build up a relationship week in, week out. And there's so many things I could say with feedback, but one that comes to mind is, well, there's two. Maybe one's not appropriate, but I'm going to say it. I remember speaking to a guy called Phil, and I stood and I was saying, "All right, Phil, I'm going to go now. Have you got any feedback?" And he just said, "Yeah, thanks for giving a toss." So that was the first thing, which is always stuck in my mind, and typically Phil. And somebody else who said, it's like the food I used to eat back home, and the fact that you are thinking about that really matters to us. There's so many stories, many people, not many, quite a few people that we serve have partners who've got dementia, and and we're able to kind of give them a day off to be able to just have a day off from cooking. But I think what we get referrals from people who've been referred to other services, and we're not different in that we're doing, offering a food service. We're different in that we offer Caribbean inspired meals. And I think, again, the bottom line is people should be able to ask for what they're used to eating. And I know we can't meet that 100%, but CaribEats meets that as much as we can. And like I said to you on the when we spoke the other day, Hannah, it's a Caribbean inspired meal, and that's it. If you start to kind of go into, oh, would you like it with this? Would you like it with that? No, it's a Caribbean inspired meal, and most people really, really appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah, Beth, when I volunteered with the NFS, I noted that you do try to sort of cater a bit to people's preferences, at least, right? With the either in the cooked meals or the grocery packages. Can you talk a bit about that? How people's different needs and preferences come through in the food they request from you?
Yeah, when we set up, it was really, really quick in the pandemic, sort of, we didn't really know what was going to happen until it just, we saw that we had an opportunity to access a kitchen, and we had the resources, and we saw that more need was there. And we built on a system that had been sort of Bristol and Sheffield National Food Service branches had already been sort of working through. So we were building on some knowledge, and people had already tried and tested a model, and then we took components of that and did our own thing. And a key part of that was the hotline, and we would volunteers we had sort of a voicemail service, and you just call, anyone could call that number and say, I need food. We didn't means test, and we'd just have a conversation over the phone, ring people back and have a conversation over the phone about what their preferences are, what sort of thing we can support them with. And a lot of that would be, what type of food do you eat? What do you like? What do you dislike? And because we did, especially initially, it was sort of once you receive this food, ring us back and tell us how it was and what you'd like next time. And so we had that sort of weekly conversation with people, and we'd adapt and change. And then it got to the point where some people have been accessing the service now for over a year. So it was quite, we knew exactly, and all our volunteers, everyone knows who that person is and what they like. And also we have actually just wound down our emergency food provision because of lack of funds and resources. And that was always, we don't see a world with food aid. We see a world where we're all collectively producing food, cooking food, eating food together. And we knew that where we are at as an organization, the amount of resources and energy that we have, we can't, if we're just going in emergency and working in crisis, we can't be shifting towards that vision that we see. So we're still in contact with everyone that's been accessing our service, and are still having a really challenging time and still need crisis support. And we're making referrals, and whenever we do cook, we're making sure that they're getting access to the food that we're cooking. But we're also doing things like, we met up in a community garden last week, and we've got an amazing program that's happening at the moment that we're just sort of feeling out and experimenting with, called Community Cooks. And we've invited our community we developed a handbook that Ali contributed to, and many other 30 plus people, both around the UK and many people locally, contributed to say, like, what is cooking for your community, and what are the skills that are needed, what are the things that you might have to navigate, what are the recipes, how do you times a recipe up to be 100 portions. We've got an amazing one about how you make 100 portions of chai, and how you look at a color chart and that sort of thing. And the person that contributed that, Parvinder, did so much experimenting to try and work out what that recipe was, and was having to go down the street giving out chai because she made so much chai to try and get that recipe right. anyway, that's a tangent, but that Community Cooks program is then using that handbook, which is an open source resource, which we're currently fundraising to print, and anyone can have access to it and use it however they like. But we've got a program that sort of does a cook day with a local professional chef and sort of works with people that love to cook but might never have cooked massive portions of food. And everyone gets together and gets to know each other and has a wonderful time. And then we run a series of workshops that use the handbook as a framework, but we have these conversations around food justice, what it means to us, what our ideas in our community are, what our barriers are, and sort of we go through a bit of a design process where as a group, we come up with these ideas that we want to put into action, these projects. So we've just come to the end of one program, and we've got a great woman session that's hopefully going to start up on a weekly basis, and it's going to be cooking food together and having discussions and workshops, and that will be focused on women in a local near Wolves Lane in Haringey, and community meals and cooking. Anyway, there's loads, but at the community garden, it was just a wonderful moment where people that had accessed our service, people that were on that program, people that have volunteered, all came together. We harvested the food, we cooked it, we sat down and had dinner, and it was just, I mean, for me, a big part of I think a step in the healing process as well, of what we've been through in the last year.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Yeah.
Can I just come in there with just something that Bethany just said? I never call you Bethany, I mean Beth. Why am I calling you Bethany now? You mentioned the cookbook, and I think it's really important for me to highlight what is involved in offering a service like this. Referrals or self-referrals, or people just asking you about what you're doing. There's so much involved in it. Some people just think it's just a meal, you cook it and it just gets to the door, but to actually to get it cooked, to leave the building, to get to a door and ask a volunteer to do that, the logistics involved in that is a lot. And so I'm not putting anybody off in starting a food service, I'm really not. But what I would like to say is, probably look at a handbook like the cookbook or the Community Cooks handbook, just to give you an idea of what it takes to do that, because it's no easy feat.
Yeah, maybe this is where the role of the council can also come in. Lisa Rain, you work with organizations like the NFS and like CaribEats. How do you see your position vis-a-vis the different communities that make up sort of the constituency in Hackney, but also all these different groups who we've heard kind of know their clients really well, or the people they work with really well and their needs? How can you best support them in doing what they do best?
Yeah, thanks, Hannah. Great to be with everyone today and hear more of the fantastic work that we know happens on our doorstep and beyond. It's a really interesting point. I think there are many different roles for the council, some more traditional, some more forward-thinking, but particularly with regards to Food Hackney, we had an existing Food Justice Alliance before the pandemic. So a group of voluntary sector community groups and residents had come forward, recognising there was a need for food support, and have put together a food action plan, a food justice action plan. And there were some groups
I'm not hearing Lisa Rain. Are other people hearing her? No. Okay. I think we may have lost her. So I'm going to move on to Patrick for now, and hopefully we can get her back.
I think I'm back. Do you want to try once more, or shall we?
Again from the beginning, yeah.
Apologies, I've had perfect connection and then just at the wrong moment. So right back at the beginning of the pandemic, there was already a Food Justice Alliance in Hackney. There were groups that recognised the need for good, nutritious food support for communities. But the scale just grew at the beginning of the pandemic. What we already knew was a need became huge as various communities and residents were impacted in new ways. And a whole range of groups across our voluntary sector were either newly formed, like CaribEats and the North London National Food Service, or we saw existing groups who had a lot of history in the community changing their work and recognising the need for food to be a really important part of that. And so actually the role the council played was a convening role. Many councils, and Hackney as well, at the beginning of the pandemic had our own emergency food response. So it is our responsible for preservation of life, and we had to get food out very, very quickly. So we had some of your very standard emergency food parcels that went out in the first month of lockdown 1. But we knew that that wasn't what the community needed. Food is so much more than a standardized parcel. It's so personal, and there are so many needs, dietary, religious, cultural, and also that human connection that Ali and Beth have both described is essential as part of the sustenance. It goes beyond the physicality of food itself. So we had an option really as a council of continuing that standardised emergency response, or working as an enabler, a facilitator for the groups that were out there that were really doing brilliant work. And it was a no-brainer for us to really move beyond. Hackney anyway was trying to work with local communities in partnerships. So we have a partnership network. In the pandemic, we had the food partnership, but also a volunteering partnership, an advice partnership, a children's and families partnership. And the food network actually really became the leading light towards the beginning, because we had all these brilliant groups that were doing amazing work with the communities they knew, but they didn't necessarily know each other as groups. So actually, really simply what we did was introduce partners across the borough to each other. And as soon as you get like-minded people into a room, or differently minded people into a room, but with a common passion, ideas flow and solutions flow. And actually what came out of that was a really quite amazing thing, which is we managed to develop a community sector led network and alliance across the borough that meant that any resident that needed food could ring either one of our partners or the council and immediately access local food in their area, but also access culturally specific and religious and dietary specific food, which is not possible in your generic kind of food bank parcels or council parcels. They could also access either food parcels or cooked food. Really important for people to have that option depending on where they're at. Some people need the independence of cooking their own food, and that's really important. Some are in a place, as Ali's described, where they just really need a break from cooking or are unwell and need that food. So actually, simply by playing a convening role, the local council was able to enable a network of 40 plus partners who together have delivered over 500,000 meals and parcels in the past year, which is a feat. But for me, that's not what's most impressive, actually. The numbers are there, but actually what's most impressive are the relationships and the partnerships that have grown up that now extend way beyond food provision, looking at sustainable food responses, looking at co-ops, supermarkets, social enterprises, but also looking at really holistic health partnerships. So this is where the success goes way beyond food. It actually looks at community cohesion and long-term health and well-being in the borough, which, as Beth mentioned, is going to be just vital in healing moving forward. I think healing from what existed before the pandemic, but also what's happened in the past year as well. So really exciting, and lots more to talk about where we go on to, but I'll leave others to come in first.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, let me pick up on that. The way you described food as linking to so many other issues from, yeah, I mean, NFS talks about sort of combating loneliness, right? Creating a sense of community, but yeah, also issues of food waste, of course, and sustainability in the food chain are really important. And so this is where I'd like to bring in Patrick, because when we're thinking about sustainable systems, right, the system is more than just the cooking and the delivery. It's actually how is food produced. Most people know that agriculture contributes to greenhouse emissions to some degree, but is there something that can be done about it, especially in an urban context, Patrick?
Yeah, sure. So it's been really lovely to hear about the power of food in doing social healing from Beth, Ali, and Lisa. And one of the things I'm so excited about, as well as that social role, is the role food could play in ecological healing. So I might start off sounding a little bit gloomy in this, but I promise overall it's a positive message, so hang in there. But if we think about it, food's the way we connect to nature every single day. When we eat, we're literally putting nature in our mouth and in our body. And it's not very usual to think about that, but if we do, then maybe it's a way of looking more closely at our relationship to nature, and what story does food tell us about our relationship to nature? So as Hannah just mentioned, at the moment, unfortunately, it's one of the most destructive activities that humans do. So it's a massive cause of climate change. Some estimates say it's half of all emissions come from producing and moving around food. It's a leading cause of habitat destruction. And in general, it's just poisoning a huge amount of the environment because of our current agricultural techniques. So spraying crops with poison, which runs into rivers, which runs into oceans. So yeah, at the moment, it's not necessarily a pretty picture. And I'm sure you've all heard headlines about this kind of environmental destruction before, or maybe watched a David Attenborough documentary and been left feeling that humans are the problem. But I really strongly believe that humans can interact with the planet in a healing way, and we can improve the health of the planet and of ourselves with every year that goes by. And I think this starts with food, and it starts with a new approach of producing food, which is sometimes called regenerative agriculture or sometimes called agroecology. But basically the story, and there are other words for it as well, but basically the story is that people who grow food from different cultures in all different parts of the world are coming to similar conclusions, that if you treat the farm or treat the land as something that's living and not in a mechanical way, then we end up with so many different benefits and overall a much better food system. So this way of treating the farm as an ecosystem and also focusing on soil health ends up leading to so many different benefits when we grow food. So better soil health, for a start, as soil health gets better and better, that means that we're storing more carbon in the soil. So it's in the ground where it can't hurt us, as opposed to in the atmosphere. It also maintains or improves yields of food, because it's in a healthier environment, so it's able to give more. The soil, if we focus on soil health, with every year that goes by, the soil can hold on to more water like a sponge. So instead of the water running straight off the land after heavy rain, it sinks in and we end up with a water storage in the soil. So plants can survive through drought periods longer and all of that kind of thing. It's better for biodiversity, and there's no need for expensive inputs like fertilizers and pesticides once the soil health gets to a certain level. So I know that's quite a lot of information, but the basic idea, and one of the reasons that food for me is the most hopeful area for our species' future, is that millions of farmers all across the world, and basically what's now an international movement, are pushing for a way of producing food in a way that improves the health of nature with every year that goes by, and in doing so also improves our health.
Cool. That's really exciting. Thanks, Patrick. To bring it back to the urban scale, how does those ideas relate to urban food systems? Can we bring some of those agricultural ideas into the city? Can we use urban spaces differently somehow? Or do we need to rethink the relationship between the city and the countryside, how food moves between them?
Yeah, I think part of it is connecting the people in cities to the farmers who are trying to farm in this better way. Because right now, there's a stat I saw recently, when we buy something from the supermarket, on average, the person who grew the food only gets 9% of the money we spend. So 9, which is barely anything. So if we think that means that there has to be a way of connecting the farmers who are trying to farm in a better way with people in cities and get a better deal for both parties. And I think a lot of people are experimenting with that. And then also, Lisa alluded to some of the kind of projects like cooperatives and people's supermarkets. There's, at the moment, I feel like it's just a big area of experimentation, and there are lots of really exciting things that can happen. One thing I'm excited about, and I've not seen happen at a big scale, but I'm trying to help with a group make this happen in London, is growing mushrooms underground from coffee waste. Because yeah, you can grow mushrooms from coffee waste, so it's like very sustainable and a really healthy urban food source. Other places, you can look around the world to other examples, like in Cuba, they have a lot of rooftop farms, and Singapore is starting a lot of high-tech rooftop farms as well. So yeah, maybe thinking about rooftops as a source of food. So in my time working on this in Islington, one of the big problems is if we're growing in containers on concrete, you need to add soil every year because it's not connected to the soil of the ground because it's just in a box. So you need to add a lot of compost every single year, which means it's quite expensive. But then at the same time, all the food waste in the city, which gets driven out, often driven out in lorries, way out, at least from my side of London, way out past North London. And then gardeners don't have access to the food waste, which becomes soil. So more composting in cities is a way to give way more people, well, first of all, convert concrete spaces into gardens, and then just give way more people affordable access. And yeah, there's a lot of exciting things going on, basically.
Yeah, sounds like there's a lot of new ideas for urban growing. Lisa Rain, you were alluding to Hackney Council and also the GLA, the Greater London Authority, trying to support innovative ideas. What are some of the new models or new sort of experimental forms that you find look promising or that you're currently working with?
I'm not going to pretend to be an expert here. We're still much exploring, and both Beth and Ali are involved in a group in Hackney doing this. So I'll give a few headlines and then maybe hand over for the detail. But we in Hackney, with the Food Justice Alliance and a subgroup called the CaribEats group, are working on an incubator programme that is a cross-London programme. GLA with Sustain and some other partners have funded an incubator for 10 alliances and partnerships across London. And each alliance partnership must work with a group of partners in an area and is exploring sustainable food responses. Some of those would include absolutely growing and development. And I haven't mentioned, we've got a brilliant network of food growers in Hackney that are doing some really exciting things as well. We're starting to link a little bit more into. But some of those things, co-ops, using people's purchasing power to group together to buy things at a better rate, to think about ethical choices in purchasing, and to work in common to share that food. Community supermarkets using surplus and again buying power to buy things at a really good price, make them available to those that can't afford to buy food at the exorbitant rates in supermarkets, but also really using the input of communities to input into what's available. And there are a number of groups in Hackney that are kind of combining a cup and a supermarket approach, or some of those with a more traditional kind of food pantry, which is surplus only as well. And then lots of really interesting ideas for social enterprise. Actually, how can you sell the amazing food that you make commercially and then use that to fund a broader range of kind of free options for others to access food or subsidized options. So those are some of the things we're looking at, as well as connecting all of the people looking at that into local growers, and also trying to work more with businesses as well, which is an area, I'll be fair to say, our alliance has been weaker on at this stage, and we're really trying to link up with the Hackney Business Network and to think more about that broader food systems approach. Actually, how do we link with businesses and suppliers? How do we link also with our waste team and our recycling team, which we've been doing a little bit more with? So that's some headlines, and I'm sure Beth and Ali might like to say a bit more about the approaches that they're looking at.
Yeah, thanks. I'm wondering if we can think sustainability also across kind of the time scale of the pandemic, because Beth mentioned the sort of healing after this, the emergency provision. You mentioned also sort of there's a change of pace now. I mean, we're still living with the pandemic, but there is sort of a new way of living with it at this moment. And I'd like to, before we invite the audience to ask some questions as well, maybe go back to Beth and Ali and ask you how you see that transition. Beth alluded to it already a little bit, away from the emergency provision, more to sort of working, training members of the community to sort of work within their own communities. Ali, how do you, as someone who, you told me when we spoke before that you're sort of a one-woman band, how do you see that transition for yourself? How would you like to make that kind of work more sustainable in the longer term, or is something else needed?
I think I don't really have a full answer for that. What I will say is, I don't know who mentioned it at the start. I think it was Lisa Rain, that a lot of businesses were in business before the pandemic, and organizations like myself started in the pandemic, and now we're kind of working backwards to move forward, because we responded to a need, and that's what we had to do at the time. But we didn't have, a business plan. We didn't have a vision. We just had, some people are hungry and we need to feed them. That was it. So moving forward, it is about hoping to stay in business because it's needed, and working out how that looks. So being part of the incubator, the Roots incubator, is time to be able to trial some ideas and test ideas, which is really helpful for somebody like myself. So maybe come back to me in a year and I'll be able to tell you what it's going to look like. But it's trial and error, and that's okay. I'm learning on the job, and I will continue to do so. I think it's very different from a business that's pivoted to offer something, say, online, or offer an emergency food service, and now they may revert back to what they were doing before. So I don't know if you want to say more on that, Beth.
Yeah. And Beth, how do you envision modifying your work in the longer term, or what do you hope to be doing longer term?
Thanks, Hannah. I've been writing notes. There's so many things I want to respond to. So there's just one thing I'd like to say before directly answering your question, if that's okay. And it's just looking at food through this lens of food as commons, and sort of cultural and natural resources being accessible to all members of society. And it sort of goes back to what Patrick was saying. It does go back to the land and the soil, and this work, we need to be looking at how our food is being produced, like through regenerative agriculture as an example, but we also need to look at who is producing that land and who is producing that food and who has access to produce food through access to land. And right now, 1% of the population owns 50% of the land in England. And there's some amazing groups looking at land rights and land justice, like Land in Our Names, and that's in relation to BPOC communities, and just this sort of really oppressive land ownership and land dynamics in the UK. So I just want to sort of acknowledge that, and that so much work needs to be done to redistribute land in the UK. And then so let me just remember the thing. So we spoke about food co-ops and composting as well. And so I wanted to mention something that we have been doing throughout the pandemic and are still doing, and sort of transitioning towards food co-ops now. But we've been working with the Castle Garden, which is a permaculture growing site in North London, and they've donated over 700 kilograms of beautiful London grown food to us throughout the pandemic, and that's been the feedback we've had from people that received that food has been just, it's a real like act of care, I think, when you're receiving food that's locally grown, and it's just such a treat. It's always a treat. I find it such a treat to have a beetroot that I know that someone has grown. I might even know the person that's grown that beetroot. I might have grown it. So that's been, and also people have met vegetables that like chard, for example. Even the other week we were cooking with someone, and they said, what is this? I've got no idea. And so together we cooked the chard, and that learning process was really amazing. And chard, as many people know, is just so easy to grow in the UK and in London. It's sort of it's a great plant. And then so now, because our emergency food provision has wound down, one of the spaces that we cooked in and work with is a community centre called Elizabeth House, which is just down the road from the garden. So now all that produce is going to Elizabeth House, and they have a co-op. So on a Tuesday they lay out the tables with all of this food surplus, and then also food that they've brought in, and then also food that's been grown in the local area, and people come and they give a small amount of money, and they take away bags and bags of food. So that's sort of small examples of things that could be done. And then I'd also like to mention Cooperation Town and their model, because we've been working with them, and they're doing amazing work sort of supporting residents to start up their own food co-ops, and they use food surplus to top up the food that is bulk purchased. And they also offer some just really great training and support in how you organise together as a group of residents. And that's really important, because the more we are connected as residents and as people living in a hyperlocal area, we can then start organising over other challenges that are in our community, housing rights, evictions, deportations, that sort of thing. So yeah, there's that. And then also we've been doing loads of composting, and massive fan of composting, and there's community gardens can take compost, so anyone that is cooking, like, link up with your closest community garden. And then Food Roots, which Ali mentioned, is a incubator program that we're in partnership with. I actually can't remember how many partners are in the partnership, but big group of partners across Hackney, especially in North Hackney. And we have some funding to pay a coordinator who's going to go across those partners and really work out and have some big conversations about what we need and how we can work together. And because right now we all have low capacity, and as much as we are doing, I mean, especially Ali has been a huge emotional support to me, as well as being like, we've got loads of food, what do we do with it, or whatever's happening at the time. We've also I feel really thankful to the people that we worked in partnership with, that we've also had that support there, with the fact that a lot of us have been experiencing burnout and that sort of thing. But we've got, because we're low capacity, we've got a coordinator that's hopefully going to help organise us, and we've also got some seed funding to trial sort of currently undefined projects that work in partnership around alternative solutions like food co-ops and food pantries, as Lucy Rain mentioned. I could speak for ages. I'm conscious of time.
Yeah, I feel like there's so many links and strands I'd like to follow up on as well, but I do want to give us a chance to chat with the members of the audience as well. So now's a moment where we can bring people from the audience in. As a transition, I wanted to ask you, the speakers, if you're eating anything for lunch after this, if you can maybe share what you have on your plate while we're bringing everyone else in. If you're a member of the audience and want to speak, you can turn on your camera, you can join the discussion now, but I also see that there's some Q&A questions popping up already as well. I'm eating a watermelon.
I don't have it with me, but I'm going to have a mushroom omelette after this.
Of course. Anyone else have anything?
I'm eating toast.
I'm eating a squash and spinach pie, leftovers from yesterday, which has got some Hackney spinach in it. So I'm looking forward to that afterwards.
Surplus food use.
I don't know what I'm eating, but I will say that I'm happen to be in Cornwall on a first holiday in a long time today. So I think whatever it is, I'm going to hear seagulls and be in the sunshine.
Cool. So I'm going to read while we wait for the audience members to become visible. I think we're waiting for that transition. I'm going to read some of the questions in the Q&A. So Sean Roy Parker asks, thinking about local abundance, reconnecting with our green spaces, and decarbonizing our food loops, how do panelists feel about a more concerted effort to integrate wild food into our diets? Anyone have particular thoughts on that? Want to take that?
I've got a few if no one else. So I think we're, as a society, starting to realize how powerful green space is, especially in the last year and a half, when for a while people weren't allowed to go to parks in some parts of London. So with wild food, I think it's really interesting to think about how can we make use of all the spaces in London that could become gardens. It's kind of difficult, but it happens in a lot of places. And I know Hackney Council, I can't remember where it was, but replaced a concrete car park and they just rewilded it, and now it's basically a meadow. And I think that kind of thinking is really interesting, of where is it in London that there's lots of soil in, maybe it's a car park, or maybe it's in just a kind of low quality place that we're not getting a lot of social value from, that we could replace with soil and then grow food there. And for it to be more wild, maybe we take a leaf out of Sevilla's book, Seville, where they have thousands and thousands of orange trees all over the place, and so everybody can just have oranges for free for a few months of the year. And I really love the idea of that kind of urban food forest, where we some of the space that's being, hopefully will be reclaimed from cars over the next 5-10 years, and then turn it over to fruit trees, because we just get all sorts of value from that.
Great, thanks. I see that we have Andrew Percy in the audience, and I wanted to bring him in because he's sort of the expert at the IGP on universal basic services and beyond the IGP. And since we're talking about food as a commons and this sort of foraging that you were talking about, Patrick, this idea that some parts of the food world are still thought of as a commons, right? Maybe fisheries or wild fruit. Is similar, I guess, to public goods in a way, and so I wanted to ask first Andrew to reflect on how this idea, the ideas that Hackney Council and the NFS are trialing, how they fit in with this universal basic services model, and maybe first explain for some of us who don't know what UBS is in simple terms.
Hi, thanks very much, Hannah. Can you hear me all right? Okay, that's a lot to cover, and so I'll take exception to being a UBS expert. I'm a UBS champion, and this is a really great example of how you kind of can't be a UBS expert, right? Because in the area of food, once you get down to the local level where you can actually deliver these kinds of services, there's dozens of organizations in every local community that need to be coordinated and work together to produce these kinds of outcomes. So I love, we included food in 7 basic services that we considered to be the essentials for life. And we advocate that these are provided free at the point of need in any and every society as a way of doing welfare in the 21st century. That's the ethos behind universal basic services. But a lot of people have difficulty with food in particular, and it's one of the ones where a lot of people will say, no, that needs to be a cash service, and you can't do that. And I love the exactly what you guys have put together here, because it demonstrates food takes people into thinking about community rather than thinking about a service, that it isn't about some 1970s version of a giant national public service. It's the role for the national government is to raise the money and distribute it. We've just heard that people have low capacity, they're running out of money after the emergency response, which relied on so many people just giving up free time to donate to this. It's not a sustainable model. So promoting these kinds of local initiatives, getting the government behind them so that the funding is actually raised nationally but spent locally, which is exactly what we would propose for universal basic services. Anyway, I don't want to take too much time because it's just really fascinating listening to everybody here. And its example, I think that Patrick and I worked actually maybe about 4 years ago on an initiative in South London called the Battersea Kitchen, where they were doing exactly all of this. They were combining social food with actually selling meals to the better off members for certain nights, and then doing training in their commercial kitchen and doing education with schools. I mean, just really cross-sectional work that's amazing to see. And I just would give thanks to everybody here who's put in all of this effort, especially over the last 18 months.
Yeah, thanks. I've brought in Kevin and Charlie. Kevin, do you want to ask your question live? Yeah, there you are.
Yeah, sure, yeah. So I'm doing a little bit of research kind of on urban agriculture, and I'm very interested in the topic, and Patrick touched on some of the points. I guess I'm just kind of interested to know the panel's view though on, just from my research, I'm looking at urban agriculture in Kenya primarily, but it seems to be, I suppose, an issue of trying to kind of close links between production and consumption. But the kind of issue is whether there actually is a supply shortage, or like is there a need for urban agriculture, I guess, to kind of fix a supply shortage, or is it really just about affordability and access to nutritious food? So it's trying to kind of understand that balance between the two. I don't know if your panel has any thoughts. I'm not sure how well I've expressed that, but does urban agriculture, I suppose, solve the primary point about access and affordable food?
Lisa, Rain, or Beth, do you have any thoughts on that? Ali?
I'll be honest that I don't know if I'm qualified to answer this question, but I can give Stephanie some personal reflections that I think it's a mixture of everything you've mentioned, absolutely. From my earlier personal research, but I'm not going to be able to quote here. I mean, I know that London has an issue with food supply. You know, I think England does as a whole, doesn't it? You know, if certain routes are cut off, and certainly I was working at one point on planning for Brexit response, and there was a real concern about food supply from our ports, which I think partly has been realised, and we do have some major haulage issues at the moment that are causing problems. So I think with all the risk factors, I think there is a need to increase urban production in light of those risks. But I wouldn't be able to say to what kind of proportion that's the most important thing, or actually it's about connecting people with food and changing lives that way. As far as I know, from an uneducated opinion, it would be both. I don't know if anybody else has more facts around that.
I'll just chime in and say I completely agree. It's both. But resilience is part of what we will need to increase in communities around the world. We talk about the Los Angeles basin. It's quite often that's 10 million people living on 2 weeks worth of food supply. So they are 2 weeks away from a massive social disaster at all times. Anytime you can bring that supply and production locally, you're also obviously meeting sustainability goals as well as resilience goals. So I think there are lots of important reasons to bring production to the consumption point.
And I would just add as well, something I didn't miss is some really important work that's happening in Hackney around inclusive economy, is actually about employment and funding of local people and local residents within cities as well, which I think again has been exacerbated during the pandemic. We're seeing a lot of local people unemployed, but yet a lot of money going out from the borough into large national structures. So actually it's a really important part of inclusive economy for us, well, as how actually we bring local growing, local businesses, local voluntary sector, and strengthen that within Hackney as well, rather than more pan-London or nationally.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Charlie, you had a question, right?
Hello. Bethany sent me some information, but I work for Chili Pep. We're a youth empowerment charity based in Sheffield, and I work with a steering group, and they were particularly interested around food and health inequalities. And I was just wondering how young people have gotten involved with the projects, and like what they found were particularly interesting, or how you got them more involved in that.
Ali, did you work with young people?
Yeah, so we had some young people who came into the kitchen as kitchen assistants, and we also had some young people, and I'm not sure what you class them as young, but what
we
age?
class under 25.
Okay, so yeah, definitely. Quite a few people were delivering, and that was their way of getting involved, but not. I think what we did is we used people where they wanted to be used. And so some people, they've got a bike, they don't mind driving around Hackney, and it was a win-win, because at the start of the lockdown, it was really helpful for them to have an excuse to be out and about. So that was one of our, come and get on your bike. And I think also young people were helping in the background a little bit. So with logistics and with social media, I suppose when you put a request out, the obvious thing is, oh, come and work in the kitchen or get on your bike. But there's so many other things that we can be involved with. And what I found is not a lot of people wanted to be seen to be doing that. It's just let me do it and let me get on with it. Yeah.
I could jump in there as well, because about 10 of the groups on our food network are youth clubs or youth organisations or linked to schools. And I think the involvement of young people in preparing and delivering food has been transformational, both for those young people at a really, really difficult time with schools closed, living in tiny urban spaces with very little access to community at that time. And just from hearing reports from those that have worked with those young people, absolutely transformational experiences where young people can really positively contribute to the really awful situation we all found ourselves in, but also huge benefits to those that receive from those young people. I mean, breaking down intergenerational barriers, a lot of those receiving food will be older people, elders in Hackney. Just really interesting, innovative programs. And I think a lot of the youth groups that stepped up in that way are going to keep food as a key element with their young people, both preparing and delivering, but also then thinking about more holistic kind of community cooking, etc. And there are so many great examples we don't have time to go into, but yeah, do get in touch, and I can always link you up with a few other partners. But I think I think some of our youth groups have been some of the leaders in actually how you sort of gather communities together to respond.
One more thing to add to that, I think a lot of the pressures and responsibilities that young people have today, it's all very abstract. It's like homework on the laptop, it's sitting down, it's, you know, they might be online all day like a lot of us. And I've worked with groups of teenagers on converting a lawn, like a patch of grass, into a vegetable garden. And it's so, everyone was very satisfied at kind of doing something with their body, and also doing something where the progress is undeniable. There's like that amazing before and after feeling. So I think maybe that's one element, if you can get that across to young people, just how satisfying it is if you give it a go, basically.
Just one thing to add, I don't know if this is definitely about food, but I work part-time in the youth provision, and we needed to paint the space. So I reached out to 2 young lads, who then reached out to 2 other young lads, who reached out to 2 other young lads, and they subcontracted. And I said to them, why did they get involved? And they said, because it's physical, because we're doing something. It's kind of hard work, and they're knackered at the end of the day, but they can see what Patrick just said, the progress. Not everybody wants to, yeah, some people just want to get their hands dirty.
Yeah, and I mean, we were talking about food and health, but actually food and mental health is also such an important part, and the growing and the getting your hands dirty, as you say, is such a big part of that. Esteban, do you want to ask your question?
Hi, so basically I am with Kevin with the like what is the role of urban agriculture, and if it's enough challenging the power the transnationals have over the, for one side, the budget they have, like also financialization of urban or farming in general, and also because all they want to do is just like separate that, like create more gaps in the relationship between people have with food, and that we need to close that gap, because people need to know more about like what are they eating and what they are eating that. I'm not sure if it's
Thanks. I wonder if we can take this one together with Matt Davies's question. Matt, do you want to come on to ask your question? I think it might link in terms of being on the bigger scale of talking in sort of the global scale of things.
Yeah, thanks, Hannah, and thank you all the panelists for a wonderful discussion. So I work with Hannah and Patrick and Andrew at the IGP, and I think Esteban's also my student. So I think Esteban's question really is to some extent, is urban agriculture enough? I think in short terms, and I think my question is quite similar to that. So I'm very much a proponent of agroecology and regenerative agriculture, and I work primarily with farmers in East Africa and in Kenya on that issue. But I also quite like to play devil's advocate a little bit. And, you know, one of the reasons we can talk, I think, about sustainable production in somewhere like East Africa is we have sort of 60 or 70% of the population who are primarily engaged in food production as their main source of living and income. And so you have a landscape of 2 to 3 acre farms right across the country. And if we're talking about regenerative agriculture and agroecology and sustainable food production in the UK, is in effect forms of urban agriculture, lots of people getting involved as a sort of a hobby in producing food, is that really enough? And in reality, in the UK, if we want to see a transition to really sustainable food production, we probably need large numbers of people to move back into farming. And that means a lot of people taking on as their main job, their main role, doing all of the hard, dirty, time-consuming, tiring work of food production. And I was just wondering what the panelists sort of think about that, and how we might encourage some of that transition as well.
Can I chime in? I think farming has a really bad reputation because it's become, like in this country, for example, it's become a worse and worse job to do for 50 years straight, pretty much. Farmers need to go into more and more debt, and they're under a huge amount of pressure to expand and grow as much as possible, because all of the incentives are around doing things bigger machines, spraying more. And I think, for example, like a lot of the children of farmers look at their parents and think that, and then they still are barely getting by, and just think, no, that's not for me. But then at the same time, I think regenerative agriculture, or agroecology, is fundamentally a more fulfilling way of living life. And there are a lot of people who take that approach to agriculture that you and I, Matt, are both fans of, and they're evangelizing on social media, showing what their life is like. And I genuinely think a lot of people feel very disconnected in cities, and especially as the food system has a few more wobbles as the year goes by, people are going to want to embrace a new food culture more and more. And I think, for example, like if land was cheaper, way more people would be moving out and trying to start farming. And then in terms of how this relates to the urban, I would see it as, what if we could see all these projects as like a celebration of food and part of an emerging culture of just enjoying food and understanding it as a link to our community and like a symbol of our interconnectedness. And I think if we see it like that, we get the social value. People will get a lot from feeling like they're connecting to something bigger than theirs. And it's not necessarily like a technocratic calculation of will we get enough calories, but it's more about encouraging the emergence of this new culture and new way of thinking about food, basically.
Mm-hmm. Drazen, did you want to ask a question?
Yes, hello. Just a quick question from me. I want to ask about universal basic services and food, and it's sort of related to something that Ali had said. She said that someone she worked with was quite incredulous at being offered free food, and it got me thinking, like, you know, Britain being Britain, how do you convince people, all sorts of people, that food, in this case, that food is not a handout, that it's part of an entitlement? That how do you make it truly universal? How do you make it socially acceptable to everyone? Let's say middle classes, off the top of my head. Thank you.
Beth, do you have any thoughts on that, having worked directly with people?
Well, it's not about looking at it through the lens of food aid and those that don't have and have. It's about looking at just sharing, like it's looking at participation. So it's participating in growing, it's participating in cooking food for one another. I love celebration, like Patrick said. It's about coming together and sharing food as a community. It's something that's been done since the dawn of time, and it's something that has been less and less accessible for us now through capitalism and this sort of individualist sort of approach to the world. And actually, if we had more public spaces and more kitchens and more gardens, that would just be, I mean, the joy that comes out of that is enough. Really, I don't think we need to look at it through it's about justice, it's about redistribution of wealth and resources and food, not about charity, it's solidarity. So yeah.
And I would just add, and learning this from Hackney Partners, not from myself, it's even beyond solidarity. It's moving from food aid to food celebration. And it's actually really when we celebrate food together, on a really human level. I've just watched, residents totally change, not only in their opinion of whether they're entitled to food or not, but in their holistic health as well.
Right. I wonder if this is a good point for us to wrap up. I feel like there's a lot we could still talk about, but we're out of time. So I've really enjoyed this conversation. I mean, we've talked about how food is necessary for our survival, but that it's much more than that as well, right? It links to health, it links to community. The way we currently produce food is actually a threat to our health and to our long-term survival. But if we think of food as a commons, that's a kind of a right, not a private good or a commodity, but something that we have a responsibility for and we can jointly perhaps manage or govern, that opens up a lot of different possibilities. And I really want to thank all the panelists for what they've been doing and for sharing their knowledge. I'm going to share some links to everyone's work in the chat in case people in the audience want to learn more about everyone's work. So yeah, Beth, Ali, Patrick, Lisa Rain, thank you so much for taking part. Also, thank you to Johan for the cool backgrounds and to Kay to her work behind the scenes. If you want to follow up with this recording, we'll put it up later on our YouTube channel. But for now, thanks everyone and enjoy your lunch if you're having it now.
And thank you for organizing, Hannah.
No worries. Thank you so much. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.